So, how on earth do we make sense of politics? I mean, it's this world of just constant churning change, right? And it turns out the tools we use to understand it, well, they've been changing right along with it. Today, we're going to dive into the evolution of political theory itself. Yep, the very frameworks we use to analyze power.
And for centuries, that one question has sparked this massive debate. Should we be studying politics through the lens of timeless philosophy and these grand ideals? Or should we treat it like a hard science, focusing only on the data and what we can actually see? Well, you're about to see that the answer has swung like wildly from one extreme to the other.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to trace the whole story of political thought. We'll start with that classical search for the ideal state, then jump into a scientific revolution that tried to strip out all values. After that, we'll see a course correction that brought relevance back into the picture, and finally, we'll land on the diverse toolkit that political scientists are working with today. Let's get into it.
Okay, first things first. Let's start at the very beginning. So what exactly is political theory? Well, the easiest way to think about it is like the foundational framework for all of political science. It's not just one single idea. No. It's the entire collection of models and concepts we use to try and make sense of power, government, and society. You could even call it the toolbox for answering the big why and how questions about our political world.
All right, our first stop on this journey takes us way back to the very beginning, what we call the traditional approaches. Seriously, these were the original blueprints for understanding politics, and they were crafted by some of history's greatest minds.
And the key thing to notice here is the emphasis on that little word should. Early political theory was all about what we called the normative. It wasn't really about describing how politics is, but prescribing how it ought to be. The whole focus was on values, on ethics, and this grand search for the ideal state. It was basically a quest for political justice.
So how did they do it? Well, these thinkers used a few core methods. They were digging into philosophical texts, studying history to find patterns, and analyzing the formal legal structures of governments. But the goal? The goal was always the same. Learn from the wisdom of the past to build a better future.
But then, everything changed. Right around the mid-20th century, this seismic shift happened. A whole new generation of thinkers just got fed up with the old ways. They were like, enough talking about what should be. We want to scientifically analyze what is. And boom, this was the behavioral revolution.
And right here you can see the core conflict laid bare. I mean, coming out of the ashes of World War II, there was this real hunger for objective scientific answers. The behavioralists, as they were called, wanted to make political science a true science, like physics or biology. They were pushing for a radical shift. They said, let's stop debating abstract ideals, and instead, let's study what people actually do. How do they vote? Why do they protest? Suddenly, the focus jumped from these dusty old texts to real, measurable, testable data.
Now, this whole revolution was really championed by a leading figure in the field, a political scientist named David Easton. And he argued that for political science to be taken seriously, to be a real science, it needed to follow a clear set of principles. And he famously laid them out as 8 core tenets.
And the core idea behind all of this? It was all about scientific rigor. Behavioralism was all about finding predictable patterns, or what they called regularities, in how people behave politically. Any claim you made had to be verifiable with testable evidence, and that, of course, meant a huge emphasis on data you could actually count, from surveys, from statistics. And here's the really crucial part. It demanded that researchers keep their personal values completely, totally separate from the objective facts. But, this revolution had its critics. A lot of them. By the late 1960s, you've got the Civil Rights Movement, the Vietnam War, just massive social upheaval. Many started to feel that, in its quest for scientific purity, political science had become kind of sterile. It felt disconnected from the real world. And that feeling led to the next major phase, the post-behavioral response. And get this, it wasn't about abandoning science, not at all. It was about making science relevant again.
And here's the fascinating twist. The leader of this new charge, it was none other than David Easton himself. Yeah, the very guy who championed behavioralism in the first place. He basically stood up and said, you know what, that pure, value-free science I was pushing, it has a major flaw. He argued that in a world facing all these urgent social problems, political scientists couldn't just be detached observers on the sidelines. They actually had a responsibility to act, to use their knowledge to improve society.
So, Easton outlined a brand new direction for the field. He called it a credo of relevance. And this new way forward, it was built on a set of 7 new principles.
And this new model just completely flipped the script. Post-behavioralism argued that, look, substance has to be more important than technique. Our research has to be relevant to solving urgent social problems. It brought values right back to the center of the conversation, arguing that the job of an intellectual wasn't to ignore them, but to actively protect them. It basically put purpose back into the scientific equation.
So that's a lot of back and forth, right? Where does that leave us today? Has the debate finally been settled? Well, not at all. The field is still evolving, creating what you could call a modern synthesis of everything that came before. I mean, new methods are emerging all the time. Take the contextualist approach, for example. It basically argues that you just can't understand a political idea without its specific historical context, right? You can't analyze a text from the 1600s using 21st century assumptions. It's just another refinement, another cool tool in our ever-improving toolkit.
And you know what? That's really the key takeaway from this whole journey. There isn't one single correct way to study politics. The traditionalists, they gave us a sense of purpose and ideals. The behavioralists, they gave us scientific rigor and data. And the post-behavioralists, they came along and reminded us that our work has to have relevance and a conscience. A good political scientist today uses all of these tools.
So I'm going to leave you with this question to chew on. In our world today, with AI, social media bubbles, and these incredibly deep political divides, which of these tools do you think is the most vital? Do we need that moral compass from the traditionalists, the cold, hard data of the behavioralists, or that urgent call to action from the post-behavioralists? Honestly, the right answer is probably a little bit of all three. Definitely something to think about.